Meeting participants now. Good morning, everyone. We'll just give folks a few minutes to join and get all of their audio settings logged into Zoom, and we'll start in about a minute or so. But thank you all for being here, and we'll get started soon.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We're admitting folks. You can take some time to get your audio settings correct and whatnot, and I think we'll start in 1 or 2 more minutes. Can I get a mic check that folks can hear me? Yeah, great.
Great. It looks like we have critical mass, so we'll get going this morning. So welcome everyone to today's Safer Drinking Water Program public workshop for the Point of Use, Point of Entry report. Welcome again. My name is Vanessa Soto with the State Water Board's Office of Public Participation. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining today's workshop on the Point of Use and Point of Entry report. This meeting is being held virtually. This meeting is also being webcast publicly in English at video.calipa.ca.gov. We are also recording today's meeting and we'll post it on the Safer calendar for anyone who may not be able to join us today. So as we go into the ways to participate, before we get into the meat of it, we have a number of ways for you to participate today. If we could get next slide, please. Thank you. If you'd like to watch only, please feel free to join us at video.calipa.ca.gov. And that's where the workshop is being webcast live. To submit a comment, we'll have a comment section, a comment and question section at the end of our presentation today. And to submit a comment, you can email safer@waterboards.ca.gov And if you could include POU workshop in the subject line, that would be great. If you're joining us on Zoom today, please feel free to raise your hand or use the chat function to submit a comment or question. Again, we'll take those at the end of the meeting. Right now, our chat function is to hosts and co-hosts only until we get to the public comment section where we will be able to change that for you. If at any time you need technical assistance, please email us at safer@waterboards.ca.gov. Or we also have myself on Zoom, and we also have Andrew available. And he's also here on video with us. So thanks, Andrew, who will be helping with tech support today. Also, we'd just like to thank everyone, all of the State Water Board staff. You'll see a number of us online today, helping with different roles as we work to put on a successful workshop for this effort. So thanks again for everyone behind the scenes. So really quickly, the Water Board's mission statement is to preserve, enhance, and restore California's water for the benefit of present and future generations. We want to begin this meeting by acknowledging the groups who have experienced economic, environmental, and social disadvantages as a result of historical marginalization, racism, and injustices. The Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience Drinking Water Program was created to bring environmental justice to California. Our work should strengthen the empowerment of Indigenous and community voices as we work together to provide safe and affordable water to all Californians. So really quickly, I wanted to do a SAFER overview. So again, the report and this workshop is under the purview of the Safer Drinking Water Program, which is the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. And so the SAFER program is comprised of a number of different divisions and offices, as well as many different tools and funding sources. Mainly who we have working in SAFER is the Division of Drinking Water. Also, you'll see DDW around as well, Division of Financial Assistance, or DFA, the Office of Public Participation, also OPP, and the SAFER Advisory Group, which is our publicly appointed board, or not board, I'm so sorry, our advisory group. And so the different tools that we have in the Safer Drinking Water Program is the annual drinking water needs assessment. We have comprehensive water system support, which we have a number of tools to provide that support. Community outreach and engagement is a pillar in the SAFER program, as well as different funding sources to implement permanent solutions. Regulatory authorities, partnerships with regulatory authorities, the SAFER Advisory Group, and a lot of multi-agency and intergovernment coordination. So thanks for sitting with that overview. Really quickly, some meeting guidelines before we begin. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and please keep yourself on mute for the presentation until we do get to the public comment and question section. If you're joining us on Zoom, please turn your video on when we do get to the comment and question portion. And please take breaks as you need them. We can circle back and you can let us know if we need to circle back to anything or if you want to recap. During the public comment and question section, we're happy to do that. So please take breaks as you need them. Again, if you need any help or have any questions or want to submit a comment, please send them to safer@waterboards.ca.gov. During the public comment section, the Water Board staff will capture feedback you share today, and we share feedback with staff and take them into consideration while we finalize the report. We welcome and value all of your comments and feedback and appreciate you joining today. So here's our agenda. We have Chad Fisher joining us, giving us a lot of good information about the report. So he'll do an overview of the report itself, as well as a snapshot of the current state of point of use and point of entry, the strategy for developing the report. Then we'll go over a case study. And finally, we'll go over findings and recommendations in the report before we take public comments and questions. And after public comment section, we'll just share some next steps, and that'll be the end for today. So really quickly, before we begin, before we bring Chad on, we just wanted to know where you're from. So I'm going to launch this poll. And if you don't mind telling us what industry or sector you represent. Are you an interested member of the public, a community member served by point of use, point of entry? Are you practitioners or technical assistance providers? Do you represent local government or local agencies? Are you in the water industry, so certifiers or manufacturers? Or are you in the environmental justice field? So thanks for filling these out. I see a lot of responses coming in. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and close that in about 5 seconds. So if you haven't already, please get those in. We have just over half of participant responses. Okay, looks like they're slowing down. So I'll go ahead and end, and we'll share the results. So you can see that most of you joining today are from local government and local agencies. So thank you for taking the time for joining us. Thank you to everyone else. Also, this is a really critical piece of the SAFER program that's been long awaited. And so we're really happy to share the report with you all. Okay, so without further ado, I will bring Chad in. Chad.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. Appreciate the intro and the tee up. I'll introduce myself. So my name is Chad Fisher. I work in the State Water Resources Control Board in the Division of Drinking Water in our SAFER section, almost done with the intro, and in a unit called the Rural Solutions Unit, and which was created about a year ago, so a pretty young unit. And one of the things that this unit has been doing is coordinating an effort to produce this point of use, point of entry report. And we've been coordinating internally, certainly with our Office of Public Participation and our Division of Financial Assistance, but then also coordinating externally with stakeholders from trying to represent, a lot of different viewpoints and try to get a holistic view, recognizing, others' expertise and viewpoints and priorities and whatnot. So I said that I've been in SAFER for about a year now, setting up this new unit. I've been in the Division of Drinking Water in the field office, in our field office branch, for kind of the previous 14 or so years, working primarily with small and oftentimes disadvantaged communities in the Central Valley. So a bit of my background, and then wanted to give a bit of recognition to the staff in the Rural Solutions Unit who really did, the bulk of the heavy lifting on this report. So really impressed with them and the report. So let me say also, I think my presentation is around 45 minutes. So just wanting to kind of level set and set some expectations there. So if you do need a break or not, that's probably how long the presentation will go. And then, plenty of time for questions and comments afterwards. Okay, so diving into the point of use, point of entry report. We wanted to do at least 3 things, and they kind of build on each other. And so the first one is that we wanted to try to understand the current, how point of use and point of entry is being deployed right now, how people are using it as a drinking water solution, and then really try to say, like, what are the obstacles and what are the success and what are the keys to success that we could find. We wanted to draw some conclusions around that, and a lot of the conclusions are really around the obstacles, and try to identify those and see how we can maybe make them better, or maybe even lessen the obstacle or eliminate it if we can. So, and again, and those are, those recommendations are around successful implementation of point of use and point of entry as a drinking water solution. And then maybe the punchline of the report is to say, maybe along with, maybe along with those conclusions are some specific pilot study recommendations that can close that seem to be able to close some knowledge gaps that are identified in the report. And there's 6 suggested pilot studies. And like I said, they're focus on some of the specific knowledge gaps. Okay, a bit of level setting here, which is what is point of use and point of entry. These little infographics or pictograms or pictures, however you want to call them, try to articulate it. So on the left, there is the point of use installation. And so the important thing there is, it's a single, water comes into the house, and, in, our scenario, it, has one or more contaminants. And so it comes into the home, and they're usually under the sink is a small treatment plant that, removes that contaminant, and thus, through a separate tap, there is, safe drinking water there. But, so that's the point of use, single additional tap that provides safe drinking water. But, for point of use, the other taps and faucets in the house, in the shower and whatnot, they aren't provided with treated water. So then in the point of entry side, it's a little bit bigger treatment plant, and it's often outside the house or maybe in the garage. And, water comes to that treatment plant, and then all of the water that gets used inside the house is treated. So rather than a separate, single spigot, often at the kitchen sink, all of the water. So there is no use for a separate spigot, because you could just turn on the kitchen sink and there's treated water there. Likewise, treated water for shower and bathroom sinks and toilets, and anything in the house is treated. Outside of the house, so watering the flowers or whatnot, that is not treated water. Okay, and then a little bit of kind of context here of how DDW thinks about, how DDW thinks about drinking water solutions. And this is generalized, but I do want to set some context here, is that, this flow chart kind of goes from the, let's call it most robust to the most robust consolidation. So if we're trying to address a drinking water issue or problem, the most robust solution for a water system or even an individual home is that they can connect and receive water service from a large utility. Those large utilities, have the resources, kind of the ongoing resources to meet current and future challenges around drinking water. So you pay your bill to a large utility, and essentially, don't have to worry about water quality or water quantity. Then if we're thinking about, a small water system, they may not be close enough to consolidate to a larger utility. And so if you could identify a new source that meets drinking water standards, right, and avoid treatment, you can avoid, increased operations and maintenance costs if you can identify and tap into a new source that maybe that's drilling in well. If that's not available, you have to think about treatment. So you think about centralized treatment, which is all of the water that, I'm going to say in a small water system, we're mostly talking about groundwater. And so there's, a well, and then all of the water, maybe the well exceeds arsenic. All of the water that exceeds arsenic coming out of the well is treated through the centralized treatment plant, and then all of the water being pushed into the water system for inside and outside of the homes is compliant water. A little bit new, something to think about that isn't being It isn't being currently implemented, but I think has some future. And there's some things that are happening that are very, very close, which is this dual distribution system. So if we take the paradigm that I was just talking about with centralized treatment, and we split the flow. We split the flow for have a treated water and an untreated water distribution system. The untreated water would be used to water the flowers and do outdoor water use, and the treated water side would be plumbed into all of the houses. And so you have a centralized treatment, which usually increases kind of the ease and maybe robustness of operations and maintenance. Pipe all of that water into the homes, and then it does require a dual distribution system, right? One for untreated water and one for treated water. Very similar kind of paradigm as point of entry, right? But instead of having a centralized treatment, we have smaller point of entry treatment, like we just talked about, which is a smaller treatment plant at each house, but it does provide treated water for all in-home use, and then point of use treatment, like we talked about, which is so those two slides are just meant to level set a bit about kind of the context of drinking water contamination and solutions. So now we can talk about where is point of use and point of entry currently being deployed. And so this map here on the right, there's 122 dots there, and those are 122 public water systems that are either permitted at using point of use or point of entry, or in the process of getting point of use and point of entry permitted and installed. So again, 122 water systems. We know quite a bit about these water systems. They're regulated by the Division of Drinking Water. And so, we know where these are and where this solution is being deployed. If we move over and look at the table on the left, for me, what stands out a bit is that, more than half are non-transient, non-community systems, and then a little less than a quarter with community and transient. Let me unpack that a little bit. Non-transient, non-communities are schools, businesses. It's usually places where people spend time, like at work or at school, spend time during the day, but don't live there. So most people think of, like I said, a school or a business. Here in the Central Valley, we have a lot of packing houses or agricultural processing, like nuts and whatnot. And so, big facilities that people go there every day and work, right? They don't live there. At any rate, and then communities, like I said, a little less than a quarter, and then transients a little less than a quarter. For me, I think one of the reasons that we see a higher proportion at non-transient, non-communities is the structure of those non-transient, non-communities often allow for it's not an easier regulatory path, but the business owner or the management have a little bit more control. And honestly, like for me, it's really about, it is easier to put in point of use or point of entry in a break room than it is inside somebody's home. And then you multiply that by the number of homes, right? And so maybe there's a few break rooms and a few restrooms and whatnot, but it's a little easier to control and easier to install. The report, we wanted to think about equity, really, to answer this question, which is, or to ask the question and think about how to answer it, which is point of use and point of entry being deployed as a drinking water solution disproportionately in communities of color and disadvantaged communities? And so we have three different ways to think about this, and they're represented here. Let's start there on the top right, which is majority race. And so what we can see is that a little less than 2/3 communities where point of use and point of entry are being used. And again, this is the 122 systems that we know a lot about. We'll get to domestic wells later, which we don't know as much about. But so this is, I just wanted to frame that. It's the 122 systems, the 122 public water systems. So again, back up there to the top right, which is a little less than 2/3 Hispanic for these communities.
Yes. And they're represented here. Let's start there on the top right, which is majority race. And so what we can see.
I am getting some feedback there.
I think that was Vanessa on accident. It looks like it's fixed.
Oh, okay, that's great. Seems like, okay, I just wanted to pause. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so take two. So majority race, a little less than 2/3 Hispanic, a little bit more than 1/3 white, and then small percentages of Asian and unknown. And then moving to the bottom for disadvantaged status, what we see there is that about half of the communities are disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged, and half aren't. For me, what that says is that for small systems, sometimes it doesn't matter how affluent a community is. There's just no economies of scale, and so you might not be able to have high enough water rates to support centralized treatment, if you have 16 homes, no matter how affluent the community is. So I think there's a real economies of scale issue argument there for point of use and point of entry. And then the Calvin-Virus screen, which is here on the left, let me unpack that a little bit. So first is that these are the same 122 dots of the public water systems. And the dots here, lighter is worse, okay? Lighter is a worse situation for that community. So a little counterintuitive. So lighter, worse, darker, better situation. Let me tell you about Calvin-Virus screen. This is how I think about it. Calvin-Virus screen takes two different kind of metrics for me and then multiplies them together to get a score. So on one side, you have, I think about it as like contaminant load or kind of potential exposure, taking things into account like air quality, water quality, use of pesticides in the community, right? So there's kind of a contaminant load part there. And then on the other side, I think about it as susceptibility, which is, how likely is it that folks are exposed? That takes things into account like poverty and access to healthcare. So each of those gets a score from 0 to 10, and then you multiply those together to get, essentially anything from 0 up to 100. For us here, around 2 up to, close to 100. So shifting gears a little bit, we've been talking about the 122 public water systems that are either permitted or in the process of being permitted for point of use or point of entry treatment. Domestic wells are a different paradigm, right? A public water system has the Safe Drinking Water Act and a regulatory framework to work from, not only, of how to, the complete set of drinking water regulations, and then maybe we can think about more specifically, the regulations around, using point of use and point of entry for compliance with Safe Drinking Water Act. So there's that regulatory framework at a public water system, and that just that doesn't exist for domestic wells. And there's a lot of need for domestic wells. There's a lot of need for domestic wells, and so if we look at the map on the right, this is, just showing kind of the need from our needs assessment. It's kind of the water quality portion of the needs assessment. And here, reds and oranges are kind of poor water quality, and then blues and greens are better water quality. So for, domestic wells, like I said, the regulatory framework, there is no regulatory framework, right? And therefore we don't have a lot of data. There is less sampling, there's less oversight. And if we think about how we might implement drinking water solutions for domestic wells, since there is no regulatory framework, and since the scale of it is orders of magnitude higher than even the total number of public water systems in the state, we would think about implementing it at a county level or maybe a groups of county level, either through counties or NGOs or whatnot. And I'm just wanted to give a peek into how we might think about deploying point of use and point of entry for domestic wells as a drinking water solution. So I already kind of said it, but we look at the table here. The orders of magnitude is a few hundred for public water systems and states falls, and then tens of thousands for domestic wells. So like I said, the scale is just completely different, right? We still have similar water quality challenges, and maybe if we're thinking about domestic wells, we have similar water quality challenges in domestic wells as we do at public water systems. However, oftentimes the sources may be more vulnerable for a domestic well to these contaminants. And so we look there on the top right, these are the contaminants we deal with mostly in California. And it's the things that we know and we regulate on the public water system side, and that are still in the groundwater, for domestic wells. So no matter which paradigm we're talking about, this is a reality. So many contaminants. That's really the gist of the upper right, circular infographic there. And then this plot here is, I don't know if folks can see it, but here on the x-axis, those are all of the counties in California. And then on the y-axis there is nitrate concentration. And this is the highest nitrate sample that we have available. Doesn't necessarily, if nobody sampled for it, we don't know. So this is the highest that we know about. But and the blue bars are public water systems, and then the orange bars are data from domestic wells. And then the last thing is that the horizontal red line is the maximum contaminant level of 10 for nitrate as nitrogen, right? And so for me, two things stick out here is just that many counties, and this is nitrate, but I think it's representative of water quality in general. But so for me, the two things are many counties, struggle with contamination, right? And, it's just a reality, and struggle public water system side and domestic well side, and then just the magnitude, the high concentrations is that many counties struggle with very high concentrations, right? And as the concentration gets higher, can do a few different things. One, if we're thinking about the solution side, it can limit solutions sometimes. Some solutions may just not be available, as concentrations rise. Maybe something easy to think about is that, if the concentration of nitrate is, 11 or 12, there may be a decent chance to drill a new well that is below that, right? And you can be smart with well construction or not. But, if nitrate all around is at 50, it's just like that. That's not a possible solution, right? So those high levels, they complicate the solutions, they increase operations and maintenance cost, and increase kind of the time and care that is needed if we're thinking about a treatment solution. For the report, we did targeted outreach, and we really wanted to try to focus in on this question of what are the limitations and obstacles for point of use and point of entry success. You think about that a couple different ways, right? Like, hey, how have folks been successful? What are the keys to success? And then also what are the limitations, and can we overcome them? How have people overcome those? And we did, like I said, we did 4 targeted outreach sessions. The 4 sessions were just this list, which is practitioners, technical assistance folks, people who are on the ground implementing these programs now. Local government, right? These are this is the regulatory community that is responsible for the oversight, and our environmental justice partners. Oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, I think most times, are aware and really experts on, how it's affecting communities, right? Like really a community perspective there, and an individual perspective. And then water industries, certifiers and manufacturers, a perspective on, for me, kind of technology, and can we can express a need, can industry meet that need? Maybe an example, since I just kind of talked about it, is, currently devices, if we think about devices, point of use and point of entry to treat high nitrate, there aren't a lot, the technology is developing to treat the higher and higher levels. And so, like, if we're identifying the need, can industry continue to push into that in that area? The report also looks at, what other states are doing, talks with like certifiers and manufacturers, did a literature search to try to see what the universe, kind of outside of California looks like, and if there's some things that we can learn from others around how to meet the challenges of, the limitations. And then the report also talks about some case studies, which I think are really interesting to provide specific insight. And let me say that people were very generous with their time to help us with these case studies, and help us really to provide the case studies and to provide the context. And I was happy to include these. I'm going to highlight one of those case studies now. The case study that I'm including here is Pueblo Unido, and they are and I got to give a shout out to Sergio, just like a really impressive individual there at Pueblo Unido, who really knows a lot about implementing point of use and point of entry as a drinking water solution, in rural communities, and just striking his expertise and his ability to succeed here. Anyway, just thank you to Sergio. And so Pueblo Unido, they are deploying, point of use and point of entry at low income households, in Riverside County. The contamination issue is arsenic and fluoride. And, this third bullet here, point of use, point of entry, I think we think about it in the context of an interim solution until maybe consolidation can happen, or until maybe technology evolves that centralized treatment can be more affordable and whatnot. But those interim, that doesn't mean that the interim solution can be less robust, right? Like, it needs to be and is, if implemented well, a robust solution, just on a smaller scale, right? This fourth bullet here about implementation and participation rates, this is huge, for me. And we heard over and over, right? Like that, and it's in another slide, but I'll say it here because this was one of my take homes, which is like, trust is the issue. Community trust. There isn't trust from individuals to whatever entity or individual is trying to implement point of use and point of use or point of entry. You're just never going to get anywhere, right? And it's, it's pretty simple, right? Like, if people don't trust you, they aren't going to allow you they may not allow you on their property, right? And they certainly may not allow you in their home, right? And these are requirements to implement point of use and point of entry. And so this trust issue, for me, sometimes I say it's everything. It's almost everything, right? And what in understanding this case study and speaking with Pueblo Unido, what I got out of it is the two sides, which is the trust that I camped out on before, and then the other side is the technical side, right? It is the ability to identify, the contamination, identify a device, get them installed, understand the operations and maintenance, to do all the things that actually make, get the device in and make it work, right? So on one side for me, again, technical, and the other side is like the community kind of trust, buy-in, communication piece. Anyway, just a very impressive kind of case study. And this, I kind of said it before, which is like the participation rate at, above 95% is, that's just kind of outstanding and speaks to kind of the how embedded Pueblo Unido is in these communities, and that embeddedness like means trust, right? Like these are friends, I think, oftentimes, right? Like they have that sort of relationship. So again, a really impressive kind of effort there, and certainly an impressive case study. We're going to move into recommendations now, and I think I have about 8 slides left, so just letting you know where we are. We had 6 recommendation categories. Here they are listed: equity, education, social, technical, financial, legislative. I have a slide on each. So these are the 6 recommendation categories. So equity, really again, trying to answer this question of like, is point of use and point of entry being deployed disproportionately in communities of color and in disadvantaged communities? And the recommendations in the report, I should back up. The recommendations that I have 6 slides here. There's a couple dozen recommendations in the report, so I'm not going to touch on every recommendation here. I'm trying to pluck out some highlights. So anyway, with that said, back to equity, which is, how can we think about and how can we try to answer that question? And so, 2 recommendations here on a micro scale, kind of a project by project scale. Can we ask that question? As we're thinking about the solution for a particular community, and then annually, and maybe it's less frequently, but I think annually is probably a good frequency, is to aggregate, like, in the state, this is where POU and POE are being deployed, maybe in the fall, maybe in the previous year, and then maybe also saying like kind of in its totality, maybe kind of like my kind of 3rd slide was like, this is what's happening, this is what has happened, like I said, in an aggregate. And then, if we're thinking about kind of equity, also, for me and for DDW, like, or for State Water Board, is that, there's an access issue here with equity, right? Is that, point of use, a single tap, a single access point in the home, isn't as good as treating all of the water into the home. And there's some trade-offs here with operations and maintenance and finances and whatnot. But if we're thinking about an exposure, right, the exposure risk, we can treating all the water going into the home, is where we want to be, if that's a possibility, if that's realistic for the specific community. And really, I think, part of equity here and part of the things we think about is that, these communities are unique, and they require kind of agile thinking about drinking water solutions to meet those unique needs. And I think, anybody that's worked with, communities, small water systems, like, understand that they're all unique, and so that we need to think about which solutions fit for the community. Education and information, and I'll talk a little bit about this in our pilot studies, because one of the pilot studies is really focused here, which is, we identified that there's a lack of education and information, or at least a lack of education and information in a place that's easy to access, and then also a lack of that education and information in, you know, in languages, you know, whether we're talking about plain versus technical languages, or if we're talking about, you know, native languages and languages that people are most comfortable reading and speaking, right? So we need to make that available. And I think this is kind of multifaceted for me, which is we want to create these for a multitude of audiences that, you know, for me, center around the actual end user to try to remove a little bit. I think that as folks understand more about, you know, the small treatment plant that's either outside or underneath their sink, like it builds trust if there's more understanding. It also, you know, just facilitates better kind of operations and maintenance and really better efficacy, right? If, you know, there is responsibility that's happening, like it's in their house. So we need to arm those people with education and information to understand it. And I think that education and information also goes towards regulatory agencies and folks that are, you know, kind of anybody involved in this process, right? And so that is making regulators giving them more expertise, but then also supplying that information to be deployed when they interact with folks who need that information. The second bullet here is just, for me, it's a bit of it's a good example of why better communication education is needed, which is we think about a scenario of a school in a small community. That school may or may not be served the same water as the community is. You know, they may be their own water system with their own well, and therefore they may or may not have different water quality than teachers and staff and students have at home, right? And if there is a water quality issue in the community and or in the school, how do we make that information available, right? It's a complicated situation, right? It's complicated enough to do public kind of outreach and notification when there is a contaminant in the community, right? It's hard enough even when it's straightforward like that, but if you complicate it, that the water quality may be different, you know, at the school and in the community, it just, like I said, I keep saying complicated, but it makes for a difficult message, right? And so this is the example for me that kind of hits home of like why this is needed. It's needed in other situations, but I like that example. Social recommendations. So we need to, I said it before, but we need to recognize that point of use and point of entry, it puts some responsibility on the homeowner. If we think about a point of use or point of entry scenario versus a centralized treatment scenario, you know, certainly the responsibility of treating the water lies on, you know, kind of in the centralized treatment, kind of solely on the water system, and then that water is delivered and folks, you know, pay their bill. But in the scenario of point of use, point of entry, like we as a drinking water community now are relying on that resident to, you know, notice if the light is blinking or if there's an audio alarm or if maybe, you know, or if they're seeing leaking or something from underneath their sink from the device, or, you know, all of those things also if we're talking about point of entry that's, you know, outside the home. And so just we need to recognize there is that shift in responsibility. And then the second bullet here is also a pilot study recommendation, which is I camped out on it when I was talking about the Pueblo case study, these two sides, the technical and the kind of social trust issue. So can we kind of develop a workforce that have both sides of those? And can we develop kind of an educational cohort to help people get there? And then the third bullet I talked about in the last slide. Technical recommendations, you know, these center on that there's several contaminants that we experience here in California that don't have an off-the-shelf performance certification to meet that need. And so this is again one of the pilot studies. Recommendation is to get, get devices certified. So performance certification, right? So get devices performance certified so that off the shelf there is there's reasonable expectation that that device will, it's been proved out through the certification that it will meet the water quality challenge experienced in that community. And there, like I said, there's several contaminants here in California that just that doesn't exist right now. We also want to recognize, or not recognize, we know anecdotally, so what we think that around a third of domestic wells in California have bacteriological issues. The data set there is really limited and it's anecdotal, but all of that limited anecdotal data set says that, we see a lot of bacteriological water quality in domestic wells. A device that is, certified to remove arsenic, it does not address bacteriological contamination. And in fact, there's a potential for it to be, at least, there certainly isn't, the device isn't certified to address bacteriological contamination. And so we need to recognize that that's the case. And can we install other devices? Can we make, certainly can we address it on site with if there is, infrastructure that's lacking or on site that is, precipitating this bacteriological contamination that needs to be addressed. But on the technology, on the device side, can we think about devices that can treat and so maybe it's, it's in series, right? Maybe so that it can treat to meet the bacteriological contamination need. And then here, again, mentioned in the pilot studies is a need for can we have better technology around performance indication? And the technology is being developed and maybe there in certain cases, but in my mind, this is, can we Bluetooth real-time performance data from a device to the resident so that they can, have confidence that their device is working well, but then also Bluetooth to that to a service provider to optimize operations and maintenance so that they can know in real time how the device is performing and can, better anticipate, when operation or when maintenance is needed on that. Sorry, I'm having trouble here. Okay. So, financial recommendations. If we think about many slides ago, I said if we think about how we would, deploy point of use and point of entry as a drinking water solution in a domestic well scenario, that we would need to, or at least one way to do it would be, I think the way, is to rely on counties or groups of counties to either do it or partner with others to develop programs to meet this need. There is a solicitation out right now from Division of Financial Assistance in the Water Board that there is funding available to develop and implement programs just like I'm talking about to try to meet this need for domestic well users. And I'll step back a little bit, which is, the State Water Board can't directly contract with, an individual resident. So we can contract with a county, or like I said, a group of counties or a county partner there. You can contract with them and they can, implement the program and, deploy the funding that way. Legislative, regulatory, or legal recommendations. There are in the point of use and point of entry regulations. The regulations are fairly robust, right? And they require many steps. well, I'll just say there's plenty of requirements. One of which is 100% participation, another is certified devices, and another is operations and maintenance plan, and another is demonstration that centralized treatment doesn't work. And there's about a dozen of them. I'm just giving some examples here. So the recommendations in the report kind of try to answer the question, are all of these the requirements explicitly necessary? And if we think a little bit differently, if we think about a solution that is more interim and not necessarily for compliance, could any of these be stripped away? So that, like I said, it would be a different scenario, right? Like the point of use and point of entry regulations are built around a compliance solution, right? If we strip away the compliance part and say like, hey, this is an interim solution, we want to deploy it quickly, are all of the dozen or so requirements needed in the exact form that they're stated in the regulations? It gets, each of the requirements gets a little complicated a little quickly, but that's what these recommendations are about. Some pilot studies. So we're nearly there, folks. And then we'll move into the comment and question portion. Here's our pilot studies. I think I've touched on all of them, but I'm going to touch on them again. The educational strategy and materials. This is again, like, can we develop a better strategy, right? Like, how do we actually put the information in? How do we get that information to folks? How do we get it there in a language that people prefer to speak and read and understand? And then how do we make fantastic materials that are easy to understand, right? And again, about taking the black box away from the small treatment plant that may be under somebody's sink or outside their home. So thinking about point of use and point of entry. Performance certification, we talked about this, is that we need to get some devices certified, performance certified for some of the contaminants that we experience here in California. Bacteriological contamination, I camped out there quite a bit. Like I said, there are devices that should work in this scenario, that should remove or inactivate bacteriological contamination. We don't have a lot of information about how well they work kind of for a longer period of time if we're deploying that in a very small scale at a domestic well. And so, like I said, I think the technology is there. So let's deploy those and let's gather data about how they actually work in the field. I think this probably, ends up thinking a lot about appropriate operations and maintenance of those devices. Like, what is required, and do they have? Is there nuance there that may make them more or less reliable? Smart devices I talked about. Like, I would love it if there are, and like I think there are devices out there and being developed that love it if the end user could, have an app on their phone that shows real world performance data. Operation or educational cohort. This is what I talked about in our case study, developing a workforce and an educational program curriculum, I guess, that develops both sides, the interpersonal trust, development of trust side, and then the technical side as well. And then the last one, point of use and point of entry. Touching on the unique needs of each of the communities, recognizing that each community is unique. We don't have we don't have a lot of data about or studies about which is a better fit. If we're thinking about trust, performance, operations and maintenance, specific contaminants, how much does it cost? For me, it'd be nice if we had, and this is why apologies. And for me, we had, a report or a technical document that shows kind of this is what point of use and point of entry look like in the real world. And it's being, we are deploying it right now. We're not aggregating kind of that data so that we can kind of draw conclusions. All right. And then I think we are, into our questions and comments. Vanessa. Hey, Vanessa, I was going to propose that we take maybe a 3 to 5 minute break for everybody, maybe come back at 10:05.
Yeah, that works. I'll send a chat out. So let's meet back here at 10:05. Thanks for the suggestion, Chad.
Great, thanks.
Right, folks, it's 10:05, so I'll invite you all to come back so we can get going on the long-awaited comment and question section of this workshop. If you're able to give us a thumbs up in your reactions of the Zoom panel, just so we know we're ready to go. Awesome, I see some thumbs up coming in, so thanks for that. All right, so Thanks, Chad, for that really informative presentation and deep dive into the point of use and point of entry report. So folks, it's now time to take public comments and questions. Again, if you're joining us on our live stream, you can email safer@waterboards.ca.gov to submit your comment or question. You can also join us on the Zoom today. And if you are joining us by Zoom, please raise your hand and wait to be called on. We'll ask that we each keep your comments or questions to 3 minutes, and then just to make sure we can get to everyone today. And if you have any follow-up, we can definitely circle back and can put you back in the queue for that. If you need technical assistance, please email safer@waterboards.ca.gov. If you're joining us by phone today on Zoom, you'll press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself when you're called on. And then please press *6 to then mute yourself after we've heard from you. So let's check the queue. We don't have any questions or comments coming in the SAFER email yet. And we don't have any raised hands in the participants panel. So we'll give you all a time to maybe take a look back at your notes and get those questions submitted or those hands raised.
Also, I wanted to mention just that as we get into the questions and comments, we have several state board staff on the line that are taking notes and whatnot, and are going to aggregate those comments. So I'm saying if I'm answering and you don't see me taking notes or whatnot, others are. And I also wanted to say, I think it's on the next slide, which is we're taking public comments for the entirety of November, and you can submit those questions. I think I'm probably duplicating what Vanessa said, but maybe a good reminder. You can submit those comments via email to the safer@waterboards.ca.gov. So until November, maybe it's on my next slide, but just wanted to send a reminder there that, really want to hear comments and questions now, but also really want to hear them until the end of the month. So. I'll also say as as people are collecting their thoughts, the report in its entirety in a draft form is available to review and digest. Like I said, the report is dozens or 100 pages long or something like that. So I touched on a lot of the sections and kind of the highlights, but it's a big report, and so folks should look that over and see what resonates with them and provide comments back. The executive summary is also there. It's several pages, and obviously a good place to start. But wanted to just point out that those are available, and that as you look at those, kind of with a reminder of throughout November, welcome comments. Nessa, do we have comments coming in through the email at all?
We don't.
Okay. That's all right. We happy to remain, as people collect their thoughts or come up with something. would encourage folks on the line, if you do have a comment or a question, please fire away. Specifically, well, some things that come to mind is that I think folks on the line, have expertise in point of use and point of entry, and if something I said or a specific slide or that I mentioned resonated, or maybe something that I didn't talk about, you want to share or comment there, I said happy to hear it. Again, recognize that the subject matter is nuanced and complicated, multifaceted, but at any rate, we'd love to hear from folks.
Hey, Chad, I have a question.
Jorge, great, yeah.
First of all, thanks for putting
George. I'm sorry. Anyway,
that's all right. Either way.
Yeah.
Just kind of a and I'm not sure if you touched on this. I apologize. I did step out about twice. But so obviously you guys are looking for comments on this. So I mean, can you talk about maybe a little bit of what kind of the expected outcome of the report will be? What's kind of the next steps after this?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. Yeah, so the next steps are going to be to take those comments and aggregate them and to incorporate them as appropriate in the report. And then we'll publish the report, and certainly the kind of the very next step after that is to get into the pilot studies, like are cataloged here. And when I say get into those, we need to fund folks to do these pilot studies, and then I think with each of them there is a work product which may be kind of a report or a paper from it, and then kind of make that available. So those are the immediate steps. It brings to mind another kind of next step or ongoing effort, which was suggested in a couple of the workshops, which is should a kind of a task force or a work group be developed, folks from state board, from industry, from local government, kind of a stakeholder group, should that be developed to continue kind of this conversation and this effort? It's something that I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm talking too much, so I think we have other folks.
Yeah, we have Rand Communities Water System up. Okay, I see they wrote in. So please go ahead and unmute if you'd like to say it, or state your question, or I can read it from the chat.
Okay, I guess I'm unmuted now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have in our area, we have like 300 connections, and the way the point of use and point of entry is, would a smaller district be more of a point of use type setup, or would it depend on different factors and depending on how it's done? Yeah,
a few different factors to think about. One, I need to get out of the way right away, is that the point of use and point of regulations for public water systems, which I'm guessing that the Rand Communities Water District is a public water system, they only allow for point of use and point of entry up to 200 connections. So if you have more than 200 connections, from a regulatory perspective, it's not an option. I think that's probably what applies to you. I do think your question and comment is a good one, kind of globally, which is, the size of the system, the contaminant. For me, a lot of it has to do with water quality, which contaminants folks are dealing with. And then also the size for me kind of speaks to, will it be able to be implemented in 100% of homes? Because it takes that community participation for a compliance solution. Like if several folks aren't interested in it, it hampers everybody else, really. So it's in the report talks about this, is that kind of, if we're talking about, let's say 100 homes, you know, and two residents don't want to do it, you know, should that mean that the other 98 can't have access to the solution? And I think the report says no, people should have that access. Anyway, so appreciate that question and comment from Rand.
Yeah, our biggest problem is we have like 1 part per million or billion over the MCL allowed. We're at 11 on average.
Yeah. Yeah.
On arsenic.
On arsenic. Yeah. I think, you know, for, you know, small,
and we are a severely disadvantaged community.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm empathizing here, but yeah, for small disadvantaged communities with the violated drinking water standard, you know, it puts, you know, Rand in this case in a difficult economic situation, right? Like thinking about centralized treatment out there, you know, it's thinking about increasing the operations and maintenance costs, which, you know, is certainly is not popular, but also just might not be realistic, right? Like,
right.
You know,
raising rates is not really a big option in this community.
Yeah, it just makes it tough. And so, you know, I'll just highlight that, you know, this sort of situation, if we were talking about a community that had 50 or so connections, but your same exact situation, there would be a strong use case for point of use or point of entry there. But in your specific case, like I said, the regulations say that point of use and point of entry is not an option.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate your comment, question.
Yes, thank you. And Chad, I think this brings up a question that we've heard also, you know, as we've made the report public, and you know, can we expect any O&M, any funding to be made available for O&M in disadvantaged communities that do implement POU and POE? Or I'm sorry, point of use and point of entry.
Yeah, I think Division of Financial Assistance is thinking about how and if operations and maintenance funding can be deployed, or, you know, one, how we might do that, and if we can even do that. You know, for what my point is, for point of use and point of entry, and you know, and others, thinking about it globally. I think Matt Pavlicek is on the line from our Division of Financial Assistance, so I'll let him chime in here.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Matt Pavlicek, I'm with our Division of Financial Assistance and manage our emergency drinking water program. So Chad is right, we do have kind of like a pilot effort right now for broader operation and maintenance funding. I would also add that aside from that, typically whenever we are assisting with funding on a point of use or point of entry type project, we do usually allow some funding to cover like maintenance plans or things along those lines for the folks that may be enrolled under a program or with a water system. So there's certainly some funding available for some basic operation and maintenance associated with point of use and point of entry treatment, but that wouldn't be for an extended period of time. Typically, when we do something like that, we're looking at like a 1 or 2 year term under a funding agreement for those kind of maintenance plans. Kind of the longer term operation and maintenance funding is that separate pilot effort that I mentioned that's kind of just getting underway.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I think that helps it put, you know, this into perspective and give folks hope that, you know, we could get to a point where O&M would be made available long term, but we're just not there yet. Okay, folks, it looks, you know, we're not getting any comments or questions coming in. So maybe we'll look at wrapping up within 5 to 10 minutes. So we can get your raised hands or put your comments or questions in the chat. And then, like Chad said, the comment period will be open through November 30th. So please, you know, if something comes to mind after we end here, that's completely okay. And we just hope to hear from you all. So we'll just stand by a little bit while we wait. But thanks, Chad. And Chad did put up the next steps. So we're taking public feedback and comments, and those will be continued to be taken until November 30th, 2022. So the end of this month. The executive summary is available now in English and Spanish. And the link is up on the Zoom here. It's bit.ly/ENG-POU-POE-EXEC summary, all one word at the end there. And also available in Spanish. And then the full draft report is also available now in English only. If the report is needed in any other language, you all are welcome to submit a request at safer@waterboards.ca.gov. And we'd be happy to work with you to get that translated. But for now, the full draft report is in English only.
Maybe as we're wrapping up, I'll also mention we do have another workshop tomorrow evening. It is going to be the same content. That is to say, my PowerPoint is the same, and so things that I say will be the same. There may be other comments and questions. Anyway, just wanted to put that out there that it isn't different content other than we may get different comments or questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have the gentleman from Rand Community Water District.
But yeah, please.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. There's one thing you might want to know. The email that you sent to our water district about this meeting, the link inside of it was invalid. I had to chase it down going to the State Water Board site to find the webinar. So you might want to check your links that you send out to people. That might be why you may not be getting a lot of people in here. It said the session has expired.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for the heads up, and we'll look into that.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, just chiming in, it wasn't unique to the gentleman from Rand. It definitely impacted a lot. The link in the notice that is available on your site works, but the links that were emailed to anybody on your listserv were not working.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, gentleman from Rand.
Yeah,
Anytime.
Thank you all for the presentation. Sorry, I have to continue to read the draft report before I can chime in, but really appreciate all y'all's time.
Sure. Likewise.
Thanks again. Have a good day. I'm out of here.
All right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, folks, that concludes our workshop, and then we will we'll stay on until 10:30. Is that okay, Chad? Just in case any other questions come in. Cool. So we'll be on until 10:30, and then and the Zoom. And then our contact information is on the screen. So safer@waterboards.ca.gov. You can also call 916-445-5615 to submit a comment. And then, yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you next time, but we'll be on until about 10:30 for any other questions that come in. And we'll also take a look at those links that were sent out in the email. We apologize for any of those technical difficulties and look to send out updated links if they're not working. It looks like we've lost a lot of the participants here, so I'll go ahead and end the meeting for everyone, but I just wanted to say thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to submit your comments and questions by November 30th. Thanks all.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa.